Everyone, welcome to WaveTalkers Live, episode number 88. My name is Chris Mattia. My amateur radio call sign is Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. Today, we are talking about the ICS communications unit and the role of the ComT, or the communications technician. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, Dan, NR6V. And also, we're joined by Scott Reed, who is a ComL. His amateur radio call sign is Kilo Mike 6 Radio Foxtrot Bravo. So thanks a lot for joining us, Scott and Dan. Let me do I'm going to quickly jump off of this screen once I get over to Zoom and get myself back into normal mode where I can see things. I'm going to pull Dan and Scott down for just a second so we can do our check-in for the day. So let me switch over to the Mac here real quick. So this is our title slide for the day, and we will jump into today's question. So today's question is, we'd like you to send in a WinLink check-in. Use the standard WinLink check-in form. Send it to all three of our call signs: W0DHG, NR6V, W6AH, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. Use the standard WinLink check-in form, and down in the comments section, let us know what one unique item that you have that you use to help solve problems inside that you carry with you in your GoKit. We're curious to see what those things are. So let's quickly jump over and walk through that check-in process together. So I'm going to jump over here to my PC where I've got a copy of WinLink Express up and running. There was a new version that just dropped. So if you don't have the new version, just be sure to quit WinLink, close it, launch it again, and it should prompt you to automatically install the new version. Go ahead and step through that process on your own. But what you're going to do is you're going to come over here in WinLink, and in the upper left-hand corner, click on the new message button. When that window opens up, you're going to click the button that says select template, and that's going to bring open your template manager. You want to click the little plus sign next to standard templates, and that's going to spring open a list of all of these different options for you. What you're looking for is the general forms section. Go ahead and give that one a click. And down near the bottom, look for the one that says WinLink check-in. And over the past couple of weeks, we've had quite a few people sending us a WinLink check out instead of a check-in. So make sure you send the check-in first, because that way you'll show up on the map. So we're going to click the double check the WinLink check-in. And what that should do is that it should open up your web browser of choice. And here in the top, we'll just quickly walk through filling this form out. At the top where it says date and time, you always want to click into that field. And what that's going to do is it's going to set the current date and time according to your computer on this form so that the form is dated correctly. We'll go ahead and click OK. Then underneath of that, this is where you're going to fill in all of our call signs. It's W0DHG, W6AH, NR6V, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. Just separate each of those with a semicolon. In the from field, this is where we're going to put in your call sign so we know who you are. Station contact, that's your handle or your name. Initial operators, go ahead and fill in any call signs for any additional operators that you have there watching the show with you live. In the session type, let us know that this is an exercise and which service you're sending this in on, either amateur radio or on the Shares network. For band, let us know how you're going to send that in. Also, I'm going to use Telnet and use the internet. But if you're going to use any of the RF modes, go ahead and select the RF band that you're going to operate in. And then the next line, here's where you set the session or the mode that you're going to be operating in. Again, I'm going to leave mine set to Telnet. In the location section, go ahead and let us know where you're currently located. Your latitude and longitude should be automatically filled in for you based on the center of your grid square, or if you have a GPS connected, it will fill those in there. In the comments section, this is where you want to let us know what a unique problem-solving item that you have with you in your GoKit at all times. Go ahead and fill that out. Click the submit button. After you do, you should get a couple of pop-ups there in your browser. When you get back to a clear browser, you can close the window. You'll be back to your message. All of those data should be filled in here for you. Go ahead and hit the post to outbox button. And then up here in the top of the menu bar where it says open session, make sure you have the session type or mode that you're going to send it in. I'm going to leave mine set to Telnet. Hit open session, click the start button. And if the demo gods are with you, your WinLink session should spring to life and send in that message. We've got quite a few check-ins coming in here. I'll download those for now, and later at the end of the show, we'll check back in here and we will map out all of these connections to see where they have all come from around the world. All right, with that, let's jump into today's topic. I get my mouse on the right screen. So today we're talking about the ICS communications unit and the role of the ComT. And as I mentioned before, we're pleased to welcome today. We have Scott Reed joining us. His call sign is KM6RFB. Now, Scott is a real certified ComT, and we're going to be bringing him in to talk about this position quite a bit. And when we first start thinking about this, the communications technician or the ComT, we're going to be going over the role and the function of this within ICS and how this role was used on a recent incident where Scott and I got to work together. Now, when I think of the role of the ComT, I think of us as the solutions geek. We're the ones who make it work, whatever it happens to be. It's usually related to communications, but on many incidents, it's pretty much anything related to technology. There is a new role that separates out more of the IT functions, but on a lot of incidents, it's still the ComT that oftentimes gets tasked with solving these problems. So let me bring Scott up briefly here. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about what the role of the ComT is and its functions?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Chris, and thank you, and welcome everybody. I'm glad to be here. So basically, the role of the ComT supports technology that are deployed in an incident or a planned event, and provide resources and tools to better understand what assets are available locally and plan how those resources might be brought to bear during times of crisis or the planned event. And some of those might be, we support land mobile radio, public safety radio, satellite telephone, both analog and digital, computer technologies, and that's kind of being branched out into its own group, data, and then we provide interoperability communication solutions. How can we talk to the locals? And because a lot of us operate on different frequencies out here in California, depending on where we're at, and we need to be able to have that interoperability, and that's the role of the ComT, is to make that work. So that's it in a nutshell.
Great. I want to bring up very briefly, let me pull Scott down so folks are able to see this. I just want to kind of orient us a little bit as to where this role fits within the overall ICS structure. Now, ICS is the incident command structure. And what the heck is that? Well, it's basically, I like to think of it as a common language and a common structure that allows first responders, it allows the support for dealing with an incident to have a set of common terms, a common language that we can all operate under, and a common structure that can really help us to make sure that we can drop anyone into our roles and everybody knows what we're talking about. And this is where that role of the ComT fits in overall in this structure. So at an incident, the hierarchy of or the chain of command.
You can prepare 2 lessons in a row.
Hang on for 1 second. Let me make sure I've got that turned on, and let me make sure I've got some folks muted here in the background. Sorry about that. So here in the structure of the ICS, up at the top, it has the incident commander who has overall responsibility for the incident, and up at the top is their command staff. Underneath of that are a variety of different sections, and the communications group is all located here underneath of the logistics section. They're divided out into what's called the service branch And under there, you'll find the communications unit. The leader of the communications unit is called the ComL, or the communications leader. And underneath of the ComL, some of the common positions you'll find there is the ComT, or the communications technician, as well as the radio operator. But today we're going to focus in on this role here of the ComT. So let's, this past week, Scott and I both participated in something called the EMSA Fall 2023 CalMat SoCal FFX exercise, and it took place on October 25th. Now, that's a whole lot of words to kind of describe what was actually going on. Scott, can you shed a little bit of light and give us a little bit more of a better description as to what this exercise was, the purpose of it, and so forth?
Absolutely. So this exercise was to get our different partners or different cooperators involved in this. And so let me just kind of set the scenario as what this exercise was. The exercise was based on a shipboard fire had been reported on a commercial cruise vessel off the coast of Ventura. With ineffective fire suppression efforts, the captain of the vessel has requested a mayday from the United States Coast Guard for evacuation. During the passenger rescue, an explosion was reported from below deck from a boiler room, causing massive injuries to a lot of the passengers. And the majority of those were burns and different types of injuries. So the agencies that were involved in this exercise, you can imagine the amount of agencies that were involved. To name a few, was the Emergency Services Authority, the California Medical Assistance Team, which is under EMSA, the Medical Reserve Corps, which is at a county level, the Point Mugu Emergency Management, the Point Mugu Naval Air Warfare Center Weapons Division, something called the RDMHS, which is the Regional Disaster Medical Health Specialist, which is based in, there's lots of them based in California, based on the OES regions. Ventura County EMS, local fire departments like Oxnard City Fire, Ventura City Fire, Federal Fire Ventura from the base was involved, and a few others. We also had a lot of local ambulances involved, American Medical Response, Antelope Ambulance Service, Premier Ambulance Service, Gold Coast Ambulance. They were serving as the ambulance strike team to transport these patients to local area hospitals as they were being brought in from the cruise ship.
Thanks. I mean, that was a great kind of walkthrough overview. Scott and I both showed up. This was all held again at Point Mugu Naval Air Station, and there were a lot of players that were involved with this overall exercise. If you many of us as hams that participate in emergency communications, perhaps with our local ARES group, our local RACES group, an ACS group, a DCS group, something like that, a lot of times, a lot of our exercises that we'll do are a lot more small scale. This was a very large scale. I think this was modeled after what, a Type 1 incident. Is that right, Scott?
That's correct.
Yeah. So this brought together a lot of agencies, and really was a huge exercise that was laid out. It's a great thing if you're ever able to participate in one of these, because you get to see the entire structure of the incident command system. You get to see a large scale exercise roll out and play out in real time. It was a really highly recommend if you're ever able to go and participate in one of these. So both Scott and I were on the communications team. We were both kind of serving in the role of ComLs. I was kind of ComTs in this, and so let's kind of walk through a little bit of what we were seeing there. So on the this is the communications room that we were set up in. I'm gonna go ahead and pull myself down so you can get a better view of this. I'll pull Scott down here for a minute as well, so you can see this kind of full screen. So inside of the communications room, we had a variety of cache radio sets that were set up. Each of these, how many of these hold? 8 or well, they varied. Some of them held about eight radios. Some of them held 20 radios. We had chargers that we would set up in here. We set up a printer, so we would have the ability to print out information as it came in. We were constantly monitoring. We would usually have a couple of radios that were set out, constantly monitoring what was going on. This was kind of like the home base for where communications was. It's nothing fancy. You can see it's really pretty bare bones. We get things set out the way that we need them. We get the cases opened up. We get the radios on charge fairly quickly. And this was the ComTechs that were doing this work, just making sure we're ready for the incident to be able to get up and running. On the day of the incident, or the day of the exercise, I should say, I'll probably use those terms in back and forth. I should probably say of the exercise, because this was a drill the entire time. On the day of the exercise, this was Scott's station in the morning as the folks were coming in and checking in. He was checking out the radios to personnel who needed them on the exercise. Now these radios, Scott, maybe you can tell us a little bit about them, how they were set up, why you've got things kind of set up. I've got here noted that the efficient organization really was a major key to success. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So what we did was we had 2 separate rooms to hand out radios because the rooms were fairly small, and try to get everybody into a room. One room would have been a huge challenge and for people stepping on each other. So we decided to break the room up into 2 groups. The ComL was in one room along with Chris, and I was put into another room. So what you're seeing here are 2 different types of radios. The radios to the left are the Kinwood TK5310s. They're UHF radios. The radios on the other side, with the bigger charger behind them, those are Apex 8000s. They're quad band radios. So they do UHF, VHF, 800 and 700 meg. And the reason the T cards are nothing more than a low-tech way to maintain accountability of your equipment, because when you're looking at thousands of dollars worth of equipment and radios and you're handing these out to people, you need to know where they are. So when you close the incident down, you know who had a radio, you know how to get a hold of them, because on the T card, you not only have their home agency, but you've got a phone number for them, you've got their name, and you've got the serial number of the radio on the card. So when they come in here, and the reason we put them with the radio is the cards are already pre-filled out with a lot of the radio information. So when someone comes in and says, I need a radio, the first questions we ask them is, what's your function? Are you working as a controller, or are you working as a player? And so depending on what their function was, depending on if they needed to have multiple bands or single band. And so we would hand them a radio, we would have them put their name on it and the information I already mentioned. And then we would give them a quick basic radio operations course. In other words, here's the radio, here's the on-off switch. Don't move this switch, and if it does, if it could take it out of repeat mode, put it back into that position. And if you need to change the channel, how do you change the channel? And one of my biggest pet peeves is people love to grab the antennas as a handle, and it breaks the antennas. It's not good for them, and we broke probably 4 or 5 antennas out there. And then the other question I would ask them is, do you need a speaker mic? And if they said yes, I would put it on their T card as a piece of equipment they checked out. And it was always good to let them know, if you had radio issues, please contact us, not the ComL, because he's busy doing administrative functions. To contact the ComT if you need batteries, if you have a radio issue, or if something's not working. That way we can come to them versus taking them out of play and having them come to us.
That was great. One of the things that you also did was you show them how to use the radio. It's always surprising the number of people who came in there, and we had to show them this is the button you push in order to talk, and you have to push and you have to hold that button down while you talk. Now, as hams, that's pretty common things that we know how to do. But for somebody who might be a driver, we had folks who were driving folks around the incident, and we had to show them, this is the push to talk button, and we would do a quick test with them on the air. Do a quick, transmit so they could hear it, make sure their voice was coming over. It soothes their worry a little bit. Many of us as new hams experience mic fright for the first time. And some of the folks who come onto an incident may also have a little bit of that. They may be a little skittish about using that. So these are the kind of quick training things that you have to do within the incident. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from the way that Scott laid out his station here was just how efficient it was. It made it so that when somebody came in and needed the radio, everything was prepped. It was ready to go. There was just he had to get the minimum amount of information from them that needed to be captured. He was able to quickly do the training and get them back out into the field, get them operating again. And by having all of those T cards, when those radios came back at the end of the incident, they were all organized in a way that we could quickly see, oh, this is radio number 432, and we can grab the T card, check it off that it's back in, and get the person out and on their way at that point. So that organization structure, as I started thinking about it, I'm going to go and pull Scott down here for just a second as we start to move into this next thing. This organization structure that Scott brought to the table hit me most the second he opened up his GoKit. And I want to just bring up a brief picture of this. This is what I saw when he first opened up his GoKit. And I was like, wow, that's a bit different than what I typically think of as a GoKit for a ham radio operator or as emergency communications operator. When he first opened it up, I saw, wow, it's so well organized. Everything's labeled. Everything's laid out. You can see here on the top of the case, as soon as he opened up the lid of the Pelican, he had a stack of T cards because that's the first thing he's likely to need. And as soon as he opened that lid, what he did was he grabbed a handful of these T cards and he just stuck them up here in the top. So those were ready to go. They were able to be quickly grabbed. He had a lot of other information that's down in here. And rather than me just talk about it, I would like to have Scott explain this himself. So let me pull myself down for a second and make just a couple of changes. And then we will have Scott walk us through his GoKit. So stand by 1 second. Bring the mouse back over to here. Change this.
I'm Scott Reed. I'm KM6 RFB. I'm a ComT certified through CISA Homeland Security. And so what we have here is one of the not what they require, but this is a recommendation when you go through the class to build your own communications kit or technical kit. So when you're out in the field and you're faced with challenges, we have the ability to do multiple different things. Starting with, we got some switches, some V connectors for phone lines, some basic tools, some basic networking equipment, label makers, testing equipment to SWR meters, network testing cables, putting ends on cables, punch down tools. Sometimes we're working with phone systems, even though we've got newer voice over IP systems, but we may be required to drop some analog. So I've got some 66 blocks and some analog phones. So that way, if I just need to put a ring down circuit between here and there, that's real easy to do. Some basic zip ties, T cards, a Bindex key radio, which is really good. It's field programmable. Portable soldering station that works off a Craftsman battery. Different types of network connectors for doing different networking ideas. And then in the bottom of the kit, we'll go back over to the kit here. So up here, I've got silver satin cable. So if you're not familiar with silver satin, this is commonly used for telephones. Cell phone cables for charging different devices, different types of ends, portable hard drive, cable wraps, USB cables, a dummy load up to 50 watts. It's nice for testing out radios if need be, and some basic Cat5 cabling. And even though there's not a lot of them out there, a floppy disk drive. You never know what you're going to encounter. And then obviously, probably some of the more important things is rain-write notepads, write and rain. So this can get wet and you still be able to do what you need to do. And the bottom, T-car holder for checking out equipment, down to manuals for different pieces of equipment, how to wire a telephone block, amateur radio quick reference guide. And then like for my Aries group, I just have some basic frequencies and phone numbers that I need to get a hold of people with. However you build it, there's no real wrong way to build this. It's what you think that you're going to need. And it's always evolving. You may figure out that, oh, I don't need this anymore, but I need this now. And every incident, you'll figure that out. Like on this training exercise, I've made a list of about 10 new items that I figured I needed to get for this kit to make it more functional. The one thing I don't have in here right now, probably the most important thing is what lives in this spot, RF connectors. Having that ability to hook in from one piece of cable to another piece of cable and to make something work is probably the most valuable piece of tool that I have here. But keep in mind, you may never see those connectors again because they may get left on the incident. So you may end up just writing some stuff off sometimes. So don't go cheap, but don't go too expensive. They're like my analog phones. They're $10 phones. If I have to abandon them, it's real easy to abandon them. I don't get overly upset. But having a good supply of everything, you're not going to cover all things. The other thing that I really like is having a scanner. This allows me to, when I hit the ground, I can program the local frequencies in for the area that I'm at to get a good idea of what's going on and start listening to traffic and different things. Again, this can be programmed off any computer. You buy these things for like $125. So again, overall individual things don't cost a lot, but collectively they do. Try to mark everything with your call sign or your information so at least people know that it's yours.
Do you have an example of how you mark things?
Yeah, absolutely. Like on here, I put KM6RFB on here for my call. You'll notice like a lot of my things up here have my call sign on it so I can find them again. So it's real easy when people are going through things. Oh, that belongs to so-and-so, like my butt set has my call on it. So I can find it again. It's again, seems crazy, but if you want to see some of your stuff again, it's easy to market and that way you can get it back. A piece of coax cable. You never know when you might need to hook up a TV or something that needs this type of coax. So again, a lot of this stuff may be out of date, but depending on where you're going and what you're working with, it could be it could mean mission success or mission failure.
Tell me about the trays that you have.
So this kit was actually repurposed. You'll notice like this up here says vitals. Behind here, this says records and trauma. This was an ALS or an advanced life support box for medical that was being repurposed. And I grabbed it and I reconfigured everything to fit my needs. So again, you don't have to spend a lot. You can repurpose whatever it works. And there you go.
How do the trays go back in?
So the trays go back in. They slack on top of it. Put this back in. So the trays just literally then I've got a piece of foam that sits over this, and on top of that is an inventory list of everything that's in here. So if I'm on an incident or working somewhere before I leave, I can quickly go through my inventory to ensure I've got everything I've recovered. And when I get home, I can obviously say, oh, I need to have so many of these and so many of those. So I know my kit is always ready to go. And then I usually put either a padlock or some safety or seals on here. That way I know when I'm done and I seal it, I know the kit's back together. I don't wonder, well, did I get it back together? So like these real quick seals I can put on and say, yeah, the kit's done. This allows me to know a quick check on what I do out in the field.
Nice.
Just really handy to have. So if you're looking at doing this, even from an amateur radio standpoint, a public safety standpoint, this kit is really invaluable for any type of operation working with radios.
Nice. Close. Such a great walkthrough there for that, Scott. Really appreciate you. How's my audio as I come back in here?
Oh, perfect.
Perfect. Great. So throughout when you first opened up that kit and you started walking through it and you showed me, you pulled the trays out, I was like, man, I got a long way to go to get my kit really in that kind of shape. And it really showed the difference between those of us who are just essentially amateurs at this and those of you who are professionals. You do this for a living. I should also mention you work for EMSA. What's your role there?
So my role at EMSA is I am a senior emergency services coordinator. It's one step below management. I'm at the high end of this. So below me would be a emergency services coordinator, which is a journeyman level class. So this is more of it's a senior level class. So my real function, my day-to-day job at EMSA is I am the fleet manager. I oversee all of our vehicles under my warehouse, plus I have 44 vehicles that we house out in the field statewide. I'm responsible for the maintenance and care and upkeep of those vehicles. I'm also a tactical communicator. So I work in our communications room, which in the process of rebuilding right now. There's only two of us. Our senior communicator, that is his job function, and then I'm his backup if he's out or we have to do multiple instances or go to multiple locations. And then I'm also work in the warehouse, push out equipment. Any given time we may have an ask to push out medical assets anywhere in the state of California, and so our job is to get that done. I'm also the OSHA compliance instructor. I do all our forklift safety training.
Very busy guy. We're going to talk more later in the show about some of those other resources that you just mentioned, but I want to chat a little bit more first about the GoKit that you had put together. Now, being a professional at this is not your only GoKit. You said you've got state kits, you got federal kits, you got what? Can you talk a little bit about that and what some of those differences are?
So the GoKit that you saw on the video is the kit that I push out with the state. It's for any mission that I'm being tasked on. I can also take it out with me on my federal deployments, but my state bags and my federal bags vary greatly as to what I do, because on the federal team, I am the safety specialist, and my ancillary job is communication. So not all the time when I'm busy doing safety things, I will back up our ComL. And a really good example of that is my last deployment to Louisiana, to Raceland, Louisiana, as the health and safety specialist. We got on the ground and we got to our point of operation and we had zero communication. Nothing. We couldn't get our computers Wi-Fi'd. We couldn't get networked, but we have to do patient reporting. Nice thing is I kind of looked around to see what I had to work with, talked to my ComL, and he was busy doing other things to try to figure out our issues. I turned around and I saw a FirstNet group sitting there. I walked over to introduce myself, and to come to find out, I had actually trained with this guy in Sacramento about 6 months prior. And we said, oh, hey, I know you, you know me. And I said, I need a cradle point. I need something to light up my tents to get conductivity to my tent so we can do patient recording. He says, not a problem. He handed me a cradle point. He says, you know, the contact out in California, keep it with you, take it home with you, give it back to the contact out there. I walked back into my tent and I was able to provide my commander, our doctors, our ComL with communications instantly.
It's it's amazing to see and to hear that as one of the things that a lot of your training and your experience as a ComT really lends itself to. When you and I were sitting there in the comms room as we were, as the incident was going on, when we had times when we were sitting kind of idle, we were always listening, we were always kind of paying attention to what was going on. One of the things that I noticed you and I did was constantly comparing kit items. Like,
Yes.
it's like, hey, what else is in your kit? What do you have? And I think that really benefited us when we ran into problems later, because we instantly kind of knew what gear each of us brought to the table. We had never worked together before. We know you from being here on the show. But you and I had never kind of experienced some of that. So we're sitting there going, I'm like, hey, do you have any cube taps? He goes, what's a cube tap? And I'm like, these things. It's just an outlet here that goes through. He's like, oh yeah, hey, do you have one of these? And he would pull some other different component out of his kit, and we just kept swapping back and forth various different items. And that getting to know each other and getting to know what each of us brought to the table ended up helping us to problem solve, similar to when you were able to reach out to that other FirstNet person and go, hey, I need this, that, or the other. One of the things that I also noticed was there are no egos involved on the incident. Everybody's moving towards helping to support the incident. And that was something that I noticed about your kit, was when you showed up to the incident, your kit was all about supporting the incident. It wasn't necessarily about your 72-hour bag that you've got your own clothes and your sleep material or whatever. It was all stuff that you had with you to support the mission, to support the exercise that was going on. And that for me was kind of that aha moment of, a lot of times, even on this show, as we've talked about GoKits, we've talked about them in terms of what you need for communications, where your kit is much more about supporting the incident. And I happen to bring a kit very similar because I support events. I'll do corporate events, I'll do networking and technical support for corporate events, and I literally just threw that bag in the truck with me, and that's what I had with me. So let's take a moment and jump back to, and before we do that, you've had some Amazon boxes showing up at your house lately. You want to talk about that at all?
So every time I deploy in the field, and this is common, every time I go out, just doing what Chris and I did, I find out what he has that I don't have, and how I can, well, that would work really good, because Chris works a lot with marine stuff, weather stuff, and there's a lot of crossover between what he has, what he does into radios, like how do I prevent corrosion? How do I seal the environment? There was some stuff in my kit I didn't have. So based upon what he was telling me, I'm sitting there writing a list, and when I get back to my hotel room, I started ordering stuff. My girlfriend, she knows when I go on deployment, because shortly after I leave, the Amazon truck makes a constant rotation to my house, dropping off packages, and I get home and there's usually a mountain of packages sitting on my desk going, yeah, Amazon was here. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But again, it goes back to the fact is, I don't know everything, but I know who I can contact. And talking with Chris, talking with Chad, talking with everybody who was on our team, that's how we become better at doing our job. And keep in mind, my kit isn't based on amateur radio or based on public safety radio. It's based on communication. And that's really what the function of a ComT is. We have to be able to work between those two environments because of the Oxcom program that CISA has, and marrying the amateur into the ICS system. So we have to understand how to work on radios, and probably one of the biggest pieces is how to program radios. And I carry, and I'm going to start adding programming cables of the popular radios to my kit, so I can do some programming out in the field, and that can be really important. But yeah, I've probably had 6 packages show up from Amazon. Um, Lots of great stuff, and a lot of stuff that Chris had on in his kit that you can get off of the WaveTalker website through their links, and I ordered a lot of stuff off there, things I didn't even think about.
So when you and I were kind of going through a lot of our kits, we did the kind of get organized. We did a whole lot of kind of swapping ideas back and forth as to what we would use and what kinds of things we had with us. Let's take a minute and let's jump back over to the incident itself. I want to talk a little bit about, oops, did I go to the right page? I think I did. Oh yeah, that's the end of, oh, I see, that's the end of ending of the video. I just hadn't advanced the slide. So I want to jump back over and talk a little bit about the exercise that we were involved with and a challenge that we ran into and how we were able to deal with that. So let me pull you down for just a second. So this is a map of the exercise that was provided to us. And it's a little hard to see, but here's item number 1 is building 200. That's where we were located. We'll talk about this in a little more detail. Item number 2 is the theater. That was kind of like the initial check-in and kind of orientation day. The bulk of what was going on that is item 3, the MCI parking lot. That's right here. This is where the event was actually taking place, if you will, or the exercise was really taking place. There was a fire station and a personal operator vehicle parking lot off to the side. But this is a location. I'm going to dive in a little bit closer so you can see this. So here's the triage treatment area here in the upper right area. And the building 200 that we were talking about is right here. This is the AST staging and the victim staging. So on a large scale incident, this would have been essentially the staging area where the equipment would have been going to and being called over as it was needed. And this is kind of like the real location where the core of what was happening was taking place in that triage area. And throughout the incident, we found that we had issues with communications between these two locations. And you can see they are literally 1 block apart. So this is building 200. This is where the briefing took place in the morning. This is the incident commander. You can see them. They're using really high-tech equipment here for the briefing. They literally were standing on the tailgate of a pickup truck in order to communicate the overall plan for the day. This was a fairly substantial parking lot, so there were lots of fire trucks and ambulances, and a lot of other vehicles were all staged in here, and they would be brought over. Inside of building 200, is also inside of the building is where our comms unit was located. So those pictures of the checking out of the radios and so forth, that was all here inside of building 200. This is that 1 block away. This is the incident treatment area. You can see there are, they would bring out a bunch of different tarps. They were colored so they could deal with the different triage levels. Here are some vehicles back in the background that we're going to look at in a little more detail here in just a minute. These are ones that Scott manages. So this is their communications truck, and this is, I like to call it their rolling warehouse. As I found that, but the incident command stuff was all in the parking lot where the picture was being taken from. So these two locations were separated by literally about one block. And during the incident, or during the exercise, the comms group, we were all set up here in the main comms room. You can see we had multiple radios going. We were monitoring the incident as it was going on. And one of the things that we noticed fairly quickly, I kept hearing static coming over the radio, and it was consistent, and it was anytime the incident commander was speaking to the overall group. And we noticed this and instantly went into a problem solving mode. We first, we did this as terms of careful troubleshooting as a technique. We wanted to focus on simple solutions, and as a major priority, we want to always minimize any disruptions. So we want to maintain whatever level of communication was there, whatever level of service we could maintain, but constantly improve it without any disruptions. And so this is the process that we followed. First of all, identify the problem, propose solutions, test those solutions thoroughly, and then implement the solutions that were identified as actual solutions. So when we started to walk through this, let's go through this in a little more detail. And I'm gonna switch over to this as to the things that we tried. I'm gonna bring Scott back up to screen as well, so we can talk about these kind of in the order that we worked through them. So the first thing that we identified was that this could be possibly a battery issue. This was parsimonious, and we asked very quickly in the comms room as our test, could it be the battery that's going on? And the ComL immediately said, the incident commander took his radio home with him last night. He didn't bring it back and check it back in. So that's a very real possibility that it could be the battery. So without even questioning, that was an easy thing. It wouldn't cause any disruption. We literally just deployed someone with a new battery to go over and swap that out. It takes just seconds. We can get them over as we start working through some of the other challenges that were there. The next thing that we thought about was, okay, if we're having these communications problems, could it be something where we could either leverage the repeater? During our setup day, we actually reached out, the ComL reached out to some of the local agencies, got us access to some of the local UTAC repeaters that we could use that were already deployed within the theater that we were working within. And so we said, okay, it could be this. And so there were a couple of possibilities. Like, we know that the radios, first of all, do the radios have the repeater plug programmed into them? We did a quick check. They did have the repeaters, but there was a slight problem. The default configuration had the repeaters on the wrong PL tone. So we were going to need to do some more testing with that. So this is where Scott and I kind of went into our initial testing mode. We went outside and started testing the repeaters. What did you find when you started testing the repeaters out in the parking lot, Scott?
One of the biggest things is this is a big cinder block building, so that created some challenges inside. So we had to go outside. And what we were finding was I could go out, get away from the building, and I could hit the repeater, but I would move 5 feet to the left, couldn't hit the repeater anymore. If I held the radio up in the air, I could hit the repeater, but if I moved again, I couldn't hit it. There was a lot of very spotty ability to hit the UTAC repeater. And Chris, you experienced that too. You went out there, moved around, and no repeater. If you were on the back side of the building, there was nothing.
It was amazing. The two of us are walking around the parking lot with our radios, trying to talk to each other as we're yelling across the parking lot, holding our radios in different ways. We're holding them up. I mean, it looked like we were some kind of signal corps thing or something out there, kind of like waving the radios around. And with all of the testing, what we really discovered, we were on an active naval air station, and there was a lot of RF interference all over the place that we hadn't experienced the day before, or had not fully experienced the day before. So clearly something was happening, perhaps in the environment, that was causing this massive amounts of interference. And the repeaters that we were trying to connect to were located on the surrounding mountains. So they weren't directly in the theater of play that we were operating on. They were a little further out. So we actually fairly quickly scrapped that idea of switching everybody over to the repeaters because the communications was spotty. We had some communications we needed to improve on that. So the next thing we went to was, can we use more power? to be able to address this issue. We looked to see if we had additional mobile units in the cache that had more power available to them. Maybe we could just overcome. We weren't going a very long distance. We looked at the equipment we had available to us, and that actually was not an option either. We did not have those units with us. We could have rolled a couple of vehicles over and had stationary vehicles that had mobile units in them. That was a possibility, but it was not quite as flexible of a solution for us to be able to implement. So that,
hey Chris,
go ahead.
Real quick before you get any further. So there was an aha moment that occurred about step 2, and it was a brief conversation that was on the radio between Oxnard Fire and I can't remember the other person, but what neither one of us knew at the time was about a week to 2 weeks before us coming down there was an air show at this naval base. And I caught a brief comment on the radio that said, yeah, we had the air show here the other week and communications was really poor. And that was the last it was ever said. And so that was kind of the aha moment when we figured out, well, not the battery, it's not the repeater. It's the environment we're working in. It's not the equipment. It was the environment. And that's when we went to step number 3. Do we need more power? How do we improve the reception? And I don't know if we would have gotten there as quickly as we did if we didn't have that little blurb of information that said, and then it made sense to me. I look up on the hill and there are a bunch of military domes and antennas going. And I realized when I was driving around the base, there was a lot of countermeasure bases, equipment out there. I'm going, oh, no wonder. There's so much RF being blown through this base. It's just killing our signals.
Right. So that's when we came to item number 4. Okay. Can we simply improve the antenna? This is like basic ham 101 troubleshooting stuff. Notice nothing here we're doing really super fancy to be able to do that. So what can you do if you need to improve the antenna? Well, first of all, you can do raise your antenna up a little bit, change the position of the antenna, get to an external antenna. So that's exactly what we did. I happen to have in my kit, I had a mag mount 2 meter 70 centimeter ham radio antenna. It's just a simple diamond mag mount antenna that I have in my kit that is a portable unit that I use. So we dug into our kits. I remember seeing in Scott's kit that he had a bunch of adapters. I said, hey Scott, we need to adapt a standard ham antenna into these land mobile radios. You dug in, you found just the connector that we needed to make that happen. We plugged it in. We tested it. We made sure that the solution worked there inside of the communications unit room. Then you and I hopped in and we proposed the solution to the ComL and said, here, this is what we're thinking. We think we can make this work. He said, okay, go ahead, implement it. So we headed over to the incident area. You and I just hopped in my truck. We rode over there. We did a quick test from the location. We called back to the comms unit as soon as we got a bit of clear air, and it was night and day difference. It was perfect, clear connection. Just that little bit of changing the antenna made a difference. So this is actually the solution that we ended up implementing for this. This is we took one of the land mobile radios. We had the antenna. You can see it just mag mounted right to the top roof of this vehicle. Initially, we had it even down a little bit lower, but it was an aluminum roof, so it wouldn't even stick to it. So we put it up here on the roof. That worked. We had a hand mic available to it. And we tested it one more time from the location, verified that it was exactly the solution that was going to work. Then we had to present this to the incident commander, and we had to train them on how to use this solution. And this is, I think, one of the cleanest examples of what you need to do to get very clear common language in order to present something, especially to something like the incident commander. So here was the extent of our training. It was 2 statements. One, use this radio to talk downfield, and we handed them the mic, so they were able to do that. And then we pointed to the radio that they had on their belt, and we said, use your handheld radio to talk to anyone here within the field. That was the extent of the training. He understood it. He reached over, he grabbed the mic, he tested it. We got a communication back on a private channel from comms that they heard the incident commander, and that was it. We backed away, let them get back to the incident. That was the extent of what our total training and implementation was. Now, once we got to this point, we quickly realized that, hey, you know what? Communications goes both ways. We needed a second solution now for the folks down at building 200 in the staging area to be able to speak clearly back to the incident. So we were actually all out of mag mount antennas at that point. So I literally pulled the antenna off of my truck, and we made a second implementation. This is actually inside of the comms room in the window, and we just gaff taped the antenna to the window, and we did a test again, verified that it was working. Scott and I drove back down to the main incident, and we did a bi-directional test. So now we had communications going back and forth in both directions. It worked remarkably well, Scott. I think it was a pretty elegant solution to the problem that we had at hand. Any other thoughts for this part of it?
Well, yeah, one of the questions we had to ask, this is a metal framed window. So we wanted to make sure that the top of the antenna wasn't touching the metal frame to ensure that we were getting out. Determined it wasn't, and it worked. And we were trying to figure out, how can we get this antenna up on the roof? We were walking around all the rooms trying to figure out, is there roof access? And Chris, you said, let's put it in the window. And well, that made sense because the window was pointing in the direction of where the triage area was. Worked real well. And again, one of the simplest solutions out there. You know, we didn't have to get complicated. We didn't have to reprogram radios. We didn't have to pause the training to allow this to be fixed. It was able to go on the fly, and it was kind of unique. As the incident commander called in going, I've got radio problems, Chris and I we were probably 50, 60% to the solution on how to get this done. And he remarked at the end of the incident going, I can't believe how quickly you guys solved the problem. He goes, I've never seen this before.
And exactly when that call came back over, when the incident commander realized he was having a problem, somebody reported back to him, we were already en route. We had figured out the solution. We were in the truck and we were driving over there in order to implement it. And his wrap up comments when he came over and talked to us, he goes, I called over and it was like seconds later, the two of you just walked up and handed me this radio and said, here, use this. And here's how you use it. And it was solved. So being that proactive, even though the incident was going on, there were no immediate things that Scott and I were actively working on. We were literally showing off stuff from our kits at the time, talking in the comms room. We were still monitoring. We were still listening. We were still passively participating in what was going on, and we heard that static. We heard something that didn't sound quite right, and we started to solve the problem before it even was realized that it was a problem elsewhere on the incident. And that's one of the big things that a ComT is really focused on all the time. They're constantly listening. How can we resolve this? So I want to take and kind of step forward just a little bit now, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the additional resources that go into supporting an incident or an activation or an exercise. And I'm going to pull Scott down here for a second because I want to walk through. I shot another little piece of video of Scott taking us a walk through a couple of the other resources that he had put together. So give me 1 second to switch my mic over, and we'll play these for you as well.
This truck here is our incident cash truck. We take this to we have the contract with CAL FIRE to provide base camp medical. And this is what we respond out with. Basically, it's a portable warehouse on wheels. We can provide almost any medical support for firefighters who come into base camp that are injured from the fire line. So that's our truck there.
Nice. Can you show me around with like
Yeah.
what kind of gears in?
Come on, son. So normally what would sit here would be our pharmacy cart. So everything on this side is back stock. So this is kind of like the warehouse piece. So we've got enough to operate out of for about 48 hours until we have to do a resupply. This stuff on this side is our frontline equipment. We've got a lot of like your bug stuff, skin lotion, a lot of stuff that you would hand out to a firefighter who's coming in off the line who just needs some chapstick, some foot powder, or whatever that might be. And then as we move forward here, we've got treatment cots. Can you turn the light on, Ryan, right there on the side?
I've got plenty of light to see on the camera.
Okay. So these are our crash carts. This has a lot of stuff that the doctors would use, syringes, bandages, a lot of the medical supplies. These two carts here are also medical supplies, but a lot of OTCs, calamine lotion. So we've got like nasal spray, just different items that we could also hand out. Moleskin, probably one of the most popular items for the firefighters coming in off the line. Then a refrigerator to keep our medications that need to be kept cold. And then we have a complete IT kit, which consists of 2 laptops, a sonophone, a Nighthawk, and then a Brothers printer in here. And that's kind of how this thing operates. It's got a built-in generator, so we can operate out of this building, out of this vehicle, or we can set everything up out in the field for operations. That's it.
Nice. And which group is this from?
This is for the Emergency Medical Services Authority. This is what we respond to the fire camps with.
Awesome. You know, one of the things that I noticed in the background this time as we were walking through the video here, Scott, is that the level of planning and the level of thought that you put into laying out this particular vehicle. When we were panning back in the back left-hand corner this time watching it through, I noticed you even have a trash can that's stuck back up in the back corner, because here you're supporting an incident. You have these firefighters, you have the personnel who's on the incident. They're coming in, they're getting the bits and pieces, the things that they need to take care of whatever it is that they've got. And here you've even thought through having that after you deploy those things, they're going to be, applying the patches or applying whatever they need. They need a place to be able to throw those. You've even thought through that level. When it comes to the supply of the equipment on an incident, you really don't have time to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to run down to the local Walmart or the local CVS or Rite Aid or whatever it happens to be, the local drugstore, and go pick stuff up. You need to have that equipment here on site ready to go. And then as soon as you realize, hey, you know what, these are some of the things we need, that's when your resupply starts kicking in to go out and start finding those additional things. You mentioned some more things about these vehicles. You want to talk any more about this?
So this truck, so in the state of California, the Emergency Medical Services Authority has 44 of these trucks staged strategically through the state of California. They're staged based on population density. So the Bay Area, Southern California have the lion's share of these vehicles, but they're staged even throughout Northern California. So those trucks are known as DEMSUs, Disaster Medical Support Units. They are designed to support an ambulance strike team, so the ambulances don't have to resupply at the hospital. They can resupply off of this truck because this truck would normally go out there with it. So we have some extra of these trucks at our warehouse in Sacramento, so we converted 4 of them to fit the need of the CAL FIRE contract. So since we have the CAL FIRE contract to support base camp medical, so what that means is anytime CAL FIRE sends out a type 1 incident management team, we are on the automatic push out. We will head to the camp, set up to provide medical only to firefighters as they come in on the line. And to what degree do we treat them? We treat them basically street to street. Get them fixed, get them back on the line. If they require anything more than that, they're automatically taken out of the game and shipped to a hospital, and they're taken out of our system and moved into the local healthcare, which has not been damaged. So that frees up our operation. So we can do basic suturing, we can do basic cardiac stuff. We deploy with a doctor, a full-scale doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, and an EMT, and a logs chief who manages this vehicle as to what supplies are being burned and has to be cognitive of the rate of burn. So he can send us a 213 back in Sacramento, and we can push out that resupply to him. And that's why the backstock is on here, is so they have some sustainability for a few days to allow things to occur easily on our end. And all this stuff is designed to be taken out of the vehicle and put into a building, a tent, underneath an easy up if we have to, if infrastructure is not set up yet at Base Camp Medical. And everything is labeled, tagged, and marked as to where it goes. So anybody should be able to walk into this truck and go, I need extension cords, and they'll find it. It would be labeled extension cords and how many are in there. So this is a thought out process.
You know, as a ham radio operator and somebody who operates a lot with local ARES groups, local ACS groups, I even operate with Cal OES. One of the big takeaways for me of going and supporting this incident was really an eye-opening thing of seeing what is the role that the professionals are doing and how, as a ham, I might be able to fit into that overall structure, and I might be able to add additional support. Seeing how you operate as a professional. And right now, we're pretty much into your professional role. We've kind of moved a little bit away from the ComT role specifically. But it really was eye-opening to me to see both things that I picked up in the Oxcom classes about, how to act and how to be supportive of the incident of what's going on, but being able to observe and see how things actually unfold, how they're used, gave me a lot more insight into how I might be able to assist you in whatever needs to be there, because I now have a better idea as to what sorts of things are available. And before we kind of wrap up this, I want to touch on one more thing, and that is I want to talk about the additional resources and building new capacity that I know you're also involved with your role. So let me pull you down because I have one more video that I want to show here. And this is of a new communications vehicle that Scott is working on building out. So let me change my mic over here again real quick, and then we'll play that for us.
So this is our MST truck. What you saw earlier, it's set up completely now. So what we have are 4 distinct workstations, all tied together back to the red cable up here, which feeds input signal to the PoE switch behind the TV. And then that lights up the PoE switch, which lights up all the data ports, which lights up the printer here at this point. And then we've got the ability here, if we want to, we can go from red to white lights, depending on the type of operation we're working with. And so you saw the cabinet earlier, the tool cabinet holds a lot of our supplies. That's where a lot of this stuff lives when it's not in service here. What else? Any questions?
What are the speakers connected to?
So the speakers are connected to the radios, the public safety radios. Yeah. So we can do interoperability from in here.
What's typically done on the laptops?
So this will be more of a logistics process. So in other words, if this truck is pushed to an incident, a logistics team gets in here and send 213s, can do basic data entry stuff from an incident.
So general workstation sorts of things. Is there other data are they ingesting data from the field or pushing things out?
So they're doing both. So they're ingesting field from the data from the field from, say, the site that they're at or multiple sites. So the concept behind this truck, this is a smaller communications truck. It could technically feed information to our large communications truck, which has a satellite dish on it and all that stuff. So we can push information to there. That's its eventual goal, is that we can push to that truck and that truck can push it back to headquarters if need be. So we have 3 of these trucks, so we can regionally set them up in an area and then set the comm truck up and then push back from there.
How are you? So what do you use to push data? Are you using things like WinLink? Are you using data feeds for anything? Are you using shares or?
So eventually we are, this truck does have the mounts up on the roof to mount a ATOS antenna. And we just purchased 5 FT991As. So one of them will live in this truck. So with the idea that we can do WinLink through it if we need to, we not only will have the amateur, the public safety radios, but we'll have the amateur radio backbone with an all mode radio. So we can do VHF, HF, and with the Mars mod in it, we can do shares through it as well. And a couple of our operators are going to get certified on Mars.
You mentioned the ATOS. What are you going to use for NVIS?
Don't know yet. We haven't figured that out. Right now, we're still growing everything back together. We are going to use just the ATOS right now, but eventually we do have a mast. So we do have a push-up mast that lives in this truck as well, along with a repeater, a UTAC repeater, and a repeater support box. So we can set that up and we can put a dipole on that mast.
Are you able to do any patching between different frequencies out of here?
So we do have an ACUM that we can put in here. So I can get a donor radio and then we can put it all together and push out from there.
Nice. Very cool.
So this is its normal configuration. There's still, like I said, there's still more changes. Chris brought up a great idea on how to patch each station into the TV, doing data sharing or video sharing. And we're going to be looking into getting that done to make this more, give us more data and make it more accessible to other people.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I really that is a great takeaway for me on that truck that you're building out, Scott, that you guys term that as one of your communications vehicles, right?
Yes. It's known as an MST, a mission support truck.
And one of the things that jumped out at me is there's one radio in there. It's the radios are there that and I got to see that the top is all covered with all types of antennas and all sorts of things. You have a variety of ways of communicating out of that, but the focus of the truck is on supporting the communications, not necessarily on all of just, it's not like wall-to-wall radios in a row of repeaters and all of those things in there. It's much more about making sure the flow, you're focused, I think, they're much more on the flow of information and supporting the information. Is that fair, or is there a better description there for
Well,
it?
it is. And in reality, there's actually 3 radios there. There's a Kenwood TK5710, which is a VHF radio. Right below it is the TK5810, which is the UHF radio, and the radio up on top is a EF Johnson 800 meg. All the radio bodies, those are just the heads. They live in the panel next to the network box that said radios. And so they have the exact same radios up in the front of the truck as we have in the back of the truck. So there's 3 radios, and then the amateur is going to live in a Pelican case. But yeah, the idea is to be able to have a place for our logistics team to work out of, other than so they're away from what's going on. They're separated to allow them the clarity and the vision to do their work without being interrupted by everybody coming up to them. To be able to get that information, digest it, pull what they need, and then push what is needed up to Sacramento or to an IMT team that is located regionally. or to be able to give information back. So the idea behind the TVs is we can get real weather. We're going to have a over-the-air antenna that we can receive digital programming over the air, so we don't have to use things like Starlink and other pieces of information. We can just have this over-the-air antenna, so we can put up information for people to read. We can put a TV outside based upon what you were telling us, Chris, that we could post instant information on that TV, so a PIO can read right off of it, or people passing by would have an understanding of what we're doing. These trucks have been sitting, they were just kind of a box on wheels. And it all started probably 3 or 4 months ago. I was at a mobile command vehicle conference in Lodi, California. And one of the vehicles I passed by, they had taken a toolbox like you saw in that video, and they mounted it in their command truck. And I stopped and thought and said, wow, we've got a bunch of these toolboxes in our warehouse. So literally all what you saw there was started by a toolbox. We mounted in there, then we mounted the refrigerator. And then I said, well, it'd be great if we had some monitors in here. And so I went to my chief and said, what do you think about this? And he goes, that's a great idea. Go with it. And so I kind of ran with it. So that truck is only 3 months out of development. It's the prototype for the other 2 trucks. And there's still some more tweaking that needs to take place.
You know, I really love how you also, everything is so well labeled. I know in this video probably didn't do it justice, but each of those 4 workstations that are set up, it's really clear to sit down at one of those, and they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and every piece of equipment, from the monitor, the mouse, the keyboard, the computer, all of that stuff that goes with that one, all has the same matching number. So it's one of those, like, if you roll up to an instant with that and you're not there as the person who is familiar with all of that gear, it's so clear that anyone could be dropped into that location and say, hey, I need you to set up these 4 stations. You know, maybe you've got a local Aries team that you're working with, and they're providing some additional support. It would be very easy to drop one of those operators into this space and say, hey, I need you to help get these 4 stations up and running. And anyone can open up that equipment and look at it and figure it out and go, oh, you know what? I see these keyboards all go together, these all go together, and so forth. The labeling, the organization, and the methodical walkthrough of that. You and I did a lot more touring around the vehicle than what we're showing here on this. You showed me the generator that's there, the hidden panels that are behind in order to have cable chases that are run as you're developing it. So as opposed to having a vehicle that's as some would say, like, breadboarded out, where it's all just kind of like all over the place, even as you're developing this vehicle, one of the things that I was really impressed with was the care and the focus that you're taking with making sure that it's also neat and tidy. Things are put away. The cables are run in a way that's out of the way. And not only does that make for a neater implementation, but it also makes it a lot safer. So there's not cables all hanging down. I mean, these trucks, an incident is not necessarily going to be taking place, you know, on a nice smooth road that you've been able to drive onto. You're going to have to drive into an area where the whole truck is kind of moving all over the place, and you've got it all tied down. I mean, it's just a beautiful implementation thus far.
Oh, absolutely. And someone posted in the chat a playbook. Be really honest with you, I had no playbook for this truck. I've literally been designing this truck in my head, going, well, let's try this. Well, that didn't work. Let's try that. Hey, boss. Hey, chief, I need to order this stuff. He goes, well, why do you need it? Because I need it to do this. He's like, okay, go ahead and order it. And I really don't have a budget for this, but he's kind of entertaining my inner child right now, going, we need this, we need that. And going back to your question on neatness, there is a strong possibility that any one of these incidences, a politician or the governor can show up and look at this, and it has to be camera ready for that person. And whether you're an Aries, you're an ACS, or whatever you're doing in Incom, you never know who's going to show up. You don't know if it's going to be your agency that you're supporting, that the big wig is going to come down and want to see what's going on. And what they don't want to see is stuff just scattered everywhere, because that really talks about how things are not being well managed. A nice, clean, methodical layout really comes back to the fact of, wow, they really got their act together. It's clean. We may not know what we're doing, but man, it looks good. And that's the big key behind it, is how do we do this and how do we make it look good for that? And, the other piece of it is, if we go to ask for money to do more projects, they're going to remember what we saw.
Yeah. If you're on the news and you don't want to, you never want to be on the news, especially, and you've got everything just like all over the place and it looks like chaos. You need to be able to, I mean, one of the things I was most impressed with your kit, above all, is you spent maybe like 2 minutes with me showing me what your kit was. And then at any point you could have called in and say, hey, Chris, I need the multimeter. It's in tray 2 in the kit, upper left corner. I could have gone in, found tray 2, found your multimeter, gotten what needed, or even relayed that message to someone else who had never experienced the kit and been able to describe, open the kit, lift the top tray out, upper left corner or whatever, that, this is the tool that we need, get it deployed over to this location. It allows for that teamwork effort that you and I were able to just pull off, having never worked together at all, other than we've had you on the show a couple of times. We see you in the after party. That's kind of the extent. You had been to some of our WinLink classes prior, but it really made a big difference for the two of us to collaborate throughout the entire incident. So I learned personally a ton from you. I want to thank you very much for coming and sharing all of your experience with us. I know a couple of people have asked about what it takes to become a ComT as well. So I wanted to bring this up. There are specific requirements. These are kind of the base courses that you would want to make sure that you've got. IS 100, 200, 700, and 800. That's kind of the core that everyone needs to have. I know folks have also asked in the chat, both on YouTube and on inside of the Zoom here. Is there a PTB or a position task book for the ComT? And yes, there is one that you have to be able to demonstrate and show these things off and get them signed off on. Anything else that you want to talk to us about the ComT course or in general? Actually, can you also talk about your kit? Because you mentioned where the origin of your kit came from to me.
Well, the origin of my kit literally came from when I took the ComT class in Santa Maria, California. CISA, Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, they brought out their big kit, and I literally took pictures and patterned as much of what they had in my kit. And probably one of the most important pieces of my kit, believe it or not, is about one of the most low-tech pieces of equipment out there. It's a 4-position wrench that can turn on the water faucet outside of any building, because a lot of those have special handles that you have to have, and having that little wrench, boy, sure makes you popular in a real quick way.
That's amazing. So thank you so much. We will have a more detailed article up on WaveTalkers. We're putting together a larger list of equipment that was in both Scott's kit and my kit. I haven't had a chance to get them uploaded quite yet. So be sure to check out on wavetalkers.com. They'll be in the resources section. We were together on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. And then yesterday at 3:00 in the morning, I left here from my house with some other folks from Cal OES. We drove all the way down to San Diego. We did the Hamtastic event down on the beach. We were operating shares and ALE and all sorts of things down on the beach, and then drove back up here last night. So I've not had a chance to be able to put that overall list together yet. I know some folks are going to be interested in seeing that. All of the folks that are joining us have been watching the comments that have been going by on YouTube. There have been a ton. Unfortunately, we don't have time to kind of dive into some of those right now. But thank you all so much for watching there on YouTube. Before we wrap things up, I do want to jump back over to my laptop here. We'll bring Scott back up here in just a few minutes when we wrap things up. I want to jump back over to my laptop, though, and I want to do another quick check of any check-ins that have come in. And while we're doing that and we're downloading those, again, anyone who's watching there on YouTube or Facebook, if you could go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, leave us a comment next to the video. It really helps share the content out to others. We really appreciate it. If you do find the stuff we're putting out there helpful, consider going on to wavetalkers.com, use that buy us a coffee link, because that does help support all that we are doing here. So we'll do another quick check here, make sure we've gotten all of the check-ins that have come in. It looks like we have. So with that, I'm going to go over and I'm going to click on the globe icon, bring up the map icon here. We're going to bring up the WinLink check-in check-in v5. That's the current version of the form. I'm going to go ahead and display that map up here. We'll blow that out to full screen. And when you right-click and drag over, we'll check in on the check-ins that we've got, and it looks like we've got WH6FBP joining us from Hawaii. Aloha, thanks for joining us over there. This looks like that's Roland joining us in Germany. We've got a station here in looks like southern Sweden. Sierra Mike 7 Yankee Tango November, thanks for joining us there. Station here in the Philippines joining us, DW1 Oscar Tango Tango, thanks for joining us from the Philippines. Always love seeing you there. Here's Terry ZL1HOG joining us from New Zealand. Now Terry, earlier in the show, so we're under a all kind of potential power issues and things going on here, but Terry sent in a picture. Let me see if I can still find it really quickly on
I'm going to post the inventory of my ComT kit into the chat.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Let me see if I've got the picture that Terry sent a little while ago of the they're under a cyclone warning. Terry, can you pop that back in the chat so I can get back to it again? I think it might be. Oh, here it is. It's up in this location. Here we go. I'll drag that over, and you can see where he's at. So he's here in Auckland. Let me bring this map up a little bit bigger. He's here in the Auckland area in New Zealand, and there is a giant cyclone that is directly over them right now. So thanks so much for joining us, Terry. Hope everything stays good weather-wise for you, and you guys are able to pull through this without any issues. Let's get back over here to the check-in map. We're going to slide back over here to North America, and I'll zoom in a little bit on some of these check-ins. Here we've got Victor Echo 3 Yankee X-Ray joining us in Canada. I'm going to roll over a lot of these here across North America. Thanks everyone for joining us in all of these. I want to see, make sure that folks are able to see their pins show up, that we did get their WinLink check-in stations here around. We'll just kind of roll over these. If you're not finding your name or not seeing your pin show up, let's make sure that you've got you're using the correct WinLink check-in form. All of these are folks who have checked in using the WinLink check-in form. I'll zoom into North America onto the West Coast here. We'll roll over some of these stations here in Idaho, down here in Utah, southern Utah as well, Las Vegas area, Southern California. We'll come back down to Southern California here. We'll come back up to Pacific Northwest to several of these stations, making sure all of you folks can see that we did get your check-in as they have come in up here in the Sacramento, Piedmont area of California. Roll down here. There's Dan joining us down in the Central Valley. Let me zoom in a little tighter to Southern California. There's a station out here west of Redding. Hey, nice to see you out there. KN6 C. Let's get that to stop there. KN6CEJ, nice to see you there. New pin location. Haven't seen that one pop up on the map previously. Several more down here in Southern California in the LA area. It's always a little tricky to drive on this Microsoft Surface. It's one of those, it's a blessing and a curse. There's Craig, KJ6IJJ, Logan, lots of folks joining us. So I want to thank everyone for joining us, sending your check-ins. It's great to see all of these coming in. Let me bring Dan and Scott back up to screen here as we do our little wrap up. Dan, what kind of thoughts do you have? This was kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, it was really fun for me because this is new stuff to me, and really impressed with Scott's kit there. That was nice, and gives me. I have a little bag I carry that it's mostly tools, and it's given me some really good ideas. So thank you, Scott, and thanks for joining us today and adding a new dimension.
I'm just happy to be here, and just to let everybody know, Dan, Dave, Chris have been really helpful with my educational level. When I started this, I was really new at this with WinLink, and with their knowledge and what they bring to it, these guys are very knowledgeable and present a very good insight to what we do in the radio world. And now with Chris, and Dave as well, and Dan as well, you guys both work public safety. And so you've got the public safety aspect and you've got the amateur. And to be able to bring that together is really critical, because that is where we're going with this. We have to be able to marry the two worlds together, but understand our separate roles.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was so thrilled to be able to work with you for 3 days hand in hand. It was both a lot of fun to be able to do, but even more than just the fun of being able to spend some time with you, it was the learning that took place on both sides. I think bringing in from my side, the amateur side of what we're able to bring to the table and show that, hey, there are roles for hams in emergency communications at an official incident, and then to see coming from you on the professional side, how is it different? What is different about the way that professionals carry themselves? What do you bring to the table? And how as a ham I can help fit in and support you and support the overall incident at that. It was a really, really wonderful experience for that.
Oh, I had a great time, and I'd love to be back anytime you guys would love to have me back.
Awesome. So with that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say 7-3 to everyone who is on YouTube. So thanks a lot for joining us there. We're going to move into the after party at this point. So if you're here inside of the in our live audience inside of Zoom, hang around for the after party. We'll open up the mics. We'll take some questions. If you'd ever like to join us for the after party, you're welcome to go on to wavetalkers.com. At the bottom of every page is a join us link. We send out one email a week, and we let you know what the URL for joining us in the live session for the week will be, and just a little bit of background information. So we've tried really hard not to spam anybody with that, but that's how we can get into the after party and to be able to participate. We'll see everyone again next week who's on the live streams. So we'll say thanks a lot, and 7-3 to you. See you next week.